Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Indiana Basketball Weekly, presented by Big Ten Plus. I'm Amanda Foster, and alongside me is Kylee Corman. And Kylee, Indiana men's basketball is on a hot streak right now. 8 wins in their last 9 games. The Hoosiers came in at 14 on this week's AP poll after 2 big wins over Rutgers and Michigan. And it feels like we're really starting to see the Indiana team that a lot of people were hoping for at the beginning of the season.
Most definitely. The Hoosiers started the preseason number 13, and they quickly fell. They did not come out too strong. Hopes were not,
to say the least.
Hopes were not completed there. But I mean, even a month ago, they were not even the same team. But we're really starting to see that now, and we've come full circle.
Exactly. They're on a 3-game win streak right now with some impressive wins and just some impressive basketball as a whole that we hadn't seen from them even a month ago, like you said. And so now we can go ahead and recap those impressive wins over Michigan and Rutgers. Playing Rutgers, Indiana broke a 6-game losing streak, which is a very big deal, especially against a team like Rutgers, because everybody knows the history that those two teams have. And Indiana hadn't beaten Michigan at Michigan since 2016. And so that says a lot on its own, as it's a very big road win. And Indiana has struggled with road wins this year especially.
Yeah, just talking about Rutgers, I mean, the Hoosiers have not beat them in 6 games. Race Thompson, the only person on the active roster to have ever seen a win against Rutgers. Trace Jackson Davis has made it vocal many times that was one of the things that he needed to check off before he could graduate. And he had an amazing game.
Yeah.
20 points, 18 rebounds, getting 2,000 points overall, 1,000 rebounds. That's really impressive.
Oh, and he gets double-doubles every game now. It's not even everybody knows how good he is, and everyone in the country has taken notice to how well Trace Jackson Davis has played. His coach Mike Woodson as well, sharing his thoughts on the big man on Monday.
This season is just at another level, man. I mean, he's doing things. I think we put him in position to handle the ball, because I did this in the pros with guys like Al Horford, Josh Smith, Melo, that could rebound the ball and initiate your break offensively that gives you early strikes that way. And he's really been good in that area and been able to make plays off the bounce himself individually. So, I just don't see a lot of holes in his game now. I mean, everybody talk about, well, he doesn't shoot jump shots. Well, shit, he does everything else. He's playing at a high level, man. And, hey, we're going to need that the rest of the way because right now we're still shorthanded in terms of bigs, Logan and Race being out. It's hard to find some rest time for him.
And Kylee, we can't talk about the Rutgers game and not talk about Miller Kopp because he's one of those senior players that also had never beaten Rutgers like Trace Jackson Davis. And he had a very big game. A lot of people who watch Indiana basketball kind of know maybe he doesn't always contribute in every way. And I know you and I have talked about this, and you were not the biggest Miller Kopp fan. Tell us why.
I just don't think he's been producing compared to other people on the team, even freshmen that have come off the bench. And I have been a Miller Kopp hater. I think I might still be a little. I think he's a great guy outside the basketball team, but I'm not sold on him. Mm-hmm. Up until the last few weeks, his defense was the first thing that stuck out to me. It seems like that's something that he's really been working on, and Indiana needs that. He did have 18 points against Rutgers, which
that's a big deal for him.
If he can do that consistently, then
yeah. The issue is that he can't do it consistently,
right.
And the 3-point shooting is all over the place, and so that like you said, I think it's justified to definitely be skeptical, but he had a good game against Rutgers. He had another good game against Michigan, which we can get into now, because he, while not necessarily producing as much on the offensive end, because nobody did except for Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino, which we can also touch on, but he was a very strong presence on defense, especially in those last 5 minutes, where it was Miller Kopp and Trey Galloway were the two that really came on strong against a very intense Michigan offense, very big team, to stop them from scoring at all and let Indiana get away with a very, very close win, which if it had been a loss would not have been a good one.
And that was a game that Indiana needed him on defense, because when Trace Jackson Davis is scoring 28 points and Jalen Hood-Schifino is scoring 21 points, and not a single other person, starter or off the bench, is scoring over 4, You better hope your defense is doing something.
Oh, yeah. They could have come in a little bit sooner than the 5 minutes
Right.
before the end of the game.
Preferably.
But, they came in, and that's a big thing that we're seeing with this Indiana team that I mentioned before is they wouldn't have been able to do that even a year ago.
No.
That intensity would just not have been there. And the fact that it is says a lot about where the team is at right now.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good sign, especially going into the time of year it is, looking at upcoming opponents, looking at Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament. But if they're going to have to be consistent with it,
Yeah.
and I don't know if they're going to be able
There are definitely
that.
still a lot of questions, and there's a lot that they can take from because they had 2 wins last week. That's a big deal, especially now they're on a 3-game win streak.
Huge.
And
Yeah.
going into the rest of the season, that's a great thing to be able to look back on, even if you have a lot of questions about how the games were won. Well, it's a big week for the Hoosiers as they get ready to face Northwestern in Illinois. Mike Woodson talked about what Indiana has to do to be successful against Northwestern on Monday.
Our focus has just got to be, we gotta go in with the defensive mentality. I mean, you can't. They're a good offensive team, and they get after you defensively. So you can't get around either one of them. So you're going to have to combat that with defense and rebounding, and you're going to have to be able to put the ball in the hole. Hey, it's going to be a dogfight. They playing in front of their crowd, their fan base, and so I'm just anxious to see what we made of when we get there.
Like Woodson said, Indiana needs to be good all around against Northwestern. And Kylee, what are your thoughts on this Northwestern team that has already beaten Indiana earlier this year?
This is a very underrated Northwestern team.
I'm so glad you said that.
They're tied for second place with Indiana.
Yeah.
They beat Indiana in Assembly Hall, which students didn't have student tickets to the game, and that is a huge factor, but you're still home. It's still Northwestern, and you're supposed to be a ranked team. And they just had a very impressive win at home against number 1, now number 3 Purdue. But that's definitely something to factor in looking at this game. They're coming in with a lot of momentum.
Yeah, well, and just to give everybody some perspective on the Big Ten standings, we have Purdue and then Northwestern and IU tied for second, and then Illinois, Maryland, Iowa, Michigan State, then Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, Nebraska, Ohio State, and Minnesota. So it is very much, they're all up there. They're all very good teams.
Nothing is guaranteed.
Oh, it's the Big Ten. Nothing's ever guaranteed. Come on. It's in any sport. You just never know what's going to happen.
The next couple weeks are going to be crazy.
Yes.
And I can promise anyone that.
Yeah, well, and especially because this Northwestern game you talked about, it was an impressive win for Northwestern over Indiana. They were able to just get Indiana out of their groove entirely, except for Jalen Hood-Schifino, who had 33 points. Trace Jackson-Davis had 18, and it was, again, just not a whole lot of big contribution from a lot of other people. And Indiana had 16 turnovers, and Northwestern had 25 points off of those turnovers. So that in itself was a crazy game. And the fact that we're getting a repeat of that now at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, and 9 p.m. games are never there. That is, you don't know what's going to happen ever.
Nope.
No, they're not. It's so bad because you sit there and you don't know what's going to happen regardless. So.
Yeah. And then you're up late stressing about it.
Exactly. And it's Northwestern is one of those teams that you should stress about regardless because they have talent on their team.
Yeah. And going back to Miller Kopp, it's where he originally started off at, and I would love to see him have a good game against them. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm a hater, but I would love to not be a hater, and I'm really hoping that he finally gets not revenge, but a comeback story.
Right. 100%, because he is playing this season with Indiana. For him has been one where he's kind of grown into himself. We've talked about it offensively and defensively. This is the time. This is his last chance to make an impact at Northwestern, against Northwestern, however you want to take it. This is it for him, and so whether or not that's going to be a storyline, who knows, but it's definitely something to keep in mind because he hasn't performed great against Northwestern in the past, and now that he's coming off of a few really good games and a few really good wins, who knows. And moving on then to Illinois, that was a different story last time these two teams matched up.
The Hoosiers killed Illinois at Illinois. Trace Jackson-Davis had a season high of 35 points, 9 rebounds, 3 blocks. He had a great game. And that was also a game where Jordan Geronimo really stood out. And I would love to see more from him again, but I'm a little nervous. Mm-hmm. It's at home. It's at noon on a Saturday.
That's another really bad time for a game. I'm sorry, it is.
I don't love it. I'm a little concerned.
It's an 80-65 win in any away environment and at Champaign, which can have a pretty good student turnout and a pretty good crowd turnout overall, is impressive. But like you said, it kind of, you got to go back and forth a little bit, because the thing with that Illinois game as well is that for most of the game, they didn't actively double Trace Jackson Davis. And that was recognized after, and that was a strategy. But after seeing how successful he was, you got to wonder if they're going to change up their strategy going into this one.
I think you have to change something.
Right.
And
of course.
I think they're going to have to, or at least for a quarter, at least for a little bit. But, yeah, I don't know. I think it could definitely be a little bit of a trap game.
Either one of these two games, I
Yeah.
think, are set up. I have a hard time believing that with the way that Indiana's season has gone overall that they're going to be able to win both of these games, because then if you think about it, that's a 5-game win streak in the Big Ten, which is very difficult for any team to do, because we just saw Purdue lost and they're the number 1 team in the country and they can't sustain that at this point in the season. So both of these games, I would say, are trap games and are ones that you really have to watch out for and be prepared for almost anything to happen.
It was just such a shocking week last week.
Yeah, in every aspect.
I don't know.
So
I don't know about this week.
Yeah, well, we'll see, and we can get to some questions now with our Swish or Miss part of the show. So, Kylee, I have a question for you to start off, and we've talked about him a lot. But will Miller Kopp finally have a good performance against his old school?
I'm going to say, I think I'm going to say Swish.
Okay.
I think he's due for it. I hope he didn't use all that energy and luck last week. I hope he's ready, but I want to say Swish for this one.
I think I will also say Swish, because Indiana needs somebody besides Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino to step up, especially offensively. And while I have my doubts about Miller Kopp's proficiency in shooting the ball, I have my doubts about every other person on the team as well, especially after that Michigan
Most
game.
definitely.
And I think he's going to come into Northwestern mentally at least a little bit more inspired to win because of everything. You know, at least he might feel like he has more to prove than someone like Tamar Bates or Trey Galloway, who doesn't have that connection to Northwestern. So
Yeah.
that's my take on it. Who knows?
All
We'll
right.
see.
Well, how about this one? Was the Michigan win a sign that Indiana can win in away environments?
I'm going to have to say miss, I think, because I saw pictures of that Michigan crowd, first of all, and it was not great. And just like everything around it, it was an away game, but I don't know if it was necessarily one of those big away environments necessarily. Like Northwestern is sold out on Wednesday. So that's going to be a true road environment. And we've seen Indiana struggle in true road environments before this season. And like not that they got lucky against Illinois because they played a very good game against Illinois, but other away teams, they've struggled massively in playing in Kansas and Arizona and all of those big schools as well. The team gets easily flustered at some points depending on how the game is going, but also depending on where they're playing and who they're playing. And I think watching Northwestern beat Purdue and seeing that environment, that's a hard thing for Indiana to go into because they're used to it in Assembly Hall, but they're not used to it in other environments. So
yeah,
I'm going to say miss.
Those students showed up at that Northwestern game.
They stormed the court. So
and I expect the same turnout, and I think I'm going to have to go with miss as well.
Yeah.
Just the last few years, Indiana has struggled on the road. I mean, that's just a theme in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And I do think Michigan was a little bit of that was a little luck there.
The whole game was a little bit of luck because it was a two-man offense, and so it's just there's a lot of Indiana's season that it seems like is back and forth on luck. But I have one final question for you. Will someone, we talked about it a little bit, but will someone besides Trace or Jalen really step up in either of these games offensively?
I'm going to have to go with putting out good vibes, manifesting it, Swish. It's going to be someone else.
Mark it down.
Don't know who.
Okay.
I'm going to say.
If you had to make a guess.
If I had to make a guess.
That's not Miller Kopp because we already talked about that.
Yeah. I honestly wasn't really going to say it.
I should have known. I should have expected that. That's my fault.
I want him to, but I just don't think he's it.
That's fair.
Right now.
That's fair.
I'm going to say maybe
You got the
Tamar.
clown music in the background, just like waiting for you to run through the whole roster.
Maybe Tamar.
Okay.
He's shown up a few times,
Yeah.
and I think he's grown up a ton since last year.
Yeah.
And when he has the confidence, I think he could be a good.
Yeah. No,
in
that is
addition
that's
to the offense.
no, I like that because he definitely has shown up in certain moments, and I feel like that's a trend for a lot of players on this team is that at certain times they're hot and certain times they're not, and they just need to be more on it. But I could see Tamar coming out and having a big game. I'm going to go, I think I will say Swish as well, but not as confidently as you maybe, but I do want to make a guess. I do want to guess that I think Trey Galloway is going to come in and have a good game as well because he's coming off a lot of momentum in those last 5 minutes against Michigan, and they call him the crazy man. He is kind of crazy, and so I feel like that kind of like a 9 p.m. game is right on track for him to come out and do something weird in an environment like Northwestern, just all of the weird vibes around that game, or a noon game, and he'll shock everybody and wake everybody up. So I think somebody's going to have to.
Right.
So that's,
Yeah,
you got to think
if they
that
don't, then that's not a given that they go away with the win.
No, it's not. They got lucky a few times, but that's not a consistent. That's not a tournament team. That's not a top 25 team, and so that's also not the team that Indiana is because they are a tournament team and they are a top 25 team. So they just have to prove it a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for joining us. To stay up to date on the Indiana Hoosiers, check out Indiana on BTN on Twitter. We'll check you back here next week.